I thank you all for your forbearance, for listening, for accompanying me on this portion of my own journey. I grew up in a world of right and wrong. I was carefully taught to fear people who looked different from us. To my newly immigrated families, this teaching was all about protection. It was about safety. Our studied fear of difference was an intentional passion to survive. We were also taught our own vision, our own version of civility. We were taught to cross the street rather than pass an African American man on the streets of New York City. And we were taught to hold all doors and say ma'am and sir to all the many doors in New York City. All adults, across all divides of difference, fear and civility. It was weird. And it was imbalanced. And my own privilege meant that I never had to think about it at all. Grandchild of immigrants from Ireland, France, Germany, Scotland, second generation to attend college, first and only master's degree in my extended family, my focus was to get things right. My grandparents took the one-way journey into the unpredictable. My parents, born in this country, survived, literally. My brother and I, what I call the whole milk and health insurance generation, in spite of the Wonder Bread and the Twinkies. My brother and I were tasked to take root, to engage, to wrestle those first fruits of blessing from this exotic new world of promise and possibility. We had to succeed. The implied contract was that affluence and success would flow sure as sunrise in the wake of hard work in business. Oops. It is a true story in our family that my dad, when I told him, I was in my 40s, that I was going to leave the work of being an accountant for medical practices, and I was going to pursue ministry. My dad, a weekly churchgoer, a prayerful man, looked at me in bewilderment and said, "Please forgive me. I have no way of understanding any life decision that doesn't promise significant financial reward." My undergraduate degree is in accounting. I was groomed to take on the family business. I was taught that women could lead. My dad rocked the insular world of materials handling equipment dealers by putting me on his board when I was in my 20s. Too young, female, shocking the world of folks seeking to thrive by selling bobcats and lift trucks. In much the same way, we soak an egg in food coloring to produce festive Easter eggs. I was soaked in the milieu, in the world view of post-World War II American white racism. It was really okay to mock those Orientals, those Japs. In response to our last name, my brother and I got called Nazis. On a good day, just Krauts. Everyone was trying to make sense of a shifting world. Folks were doing what human beings do. We were seeking certainty through solidity. We were seeking certainty through stasis, names, labels, certainty through fixed categories of right and wrong, in and out, acceptable, not acceptable. In college in the late 1960s, I paid my way as a musician. I sang in jug bands and rock bands. I played folk music in coffee houses that were wedged in the dark basements of overheated brick buildings all over upstate New York and New England. Most of that time, my car, a Ford Pinto, for those of you who can think back that far, had no working heater. Bringing the cars into the hot coffee houses from the cold car was a challenge. It was a big change. It took a long time for the strings to adjust to the change in temperature. And often, in the first several songs, we'd have to stop midway in a song to tune the guitar. In the pointless patter required to keep the attention of the audience, we would say witty and horrendous things. We might be in the middle of saying, "Don't sing love songs, you'll wake my mother." And we'd have to say, "Pardon us, folks, we're just interrupting this lyric English ballad with an old Japanese folk song called Tu Ning." And I do cringe to repeat that now, but I do it with a purpose. I need to own the story so I can change the story. I need to own the story so I can change the story. As a woman of privilege, I need to own my story of telling racist jokes. I don't do this to risk sliding into the pit of shame and guilt. That trip is optional. Getting stuck in shame and guilt is the way pervasive evil traps privileged people of goodwill in a state of inaction and disengagement. Staying in the shame and guilt is optional. Today I work when those feelings come. I work to stay with the feeling, to feel it sting, and then I work to let it go. I recall my own telling of racist jokes, not to permanently tattoo myself in the bright colors and shocking designs of guilt and shame. I tell the story to learn how to take risk. I tell the story to learn how to change and grow flexible beyond rigidity, to learn how to be wrong. I tell the story to learn how to be held accountable, to engage that which with I never had to engage. I tell the story to learn how to be flexible and forbearing and even forgiving, and I tell the story to learn how to make things better. The purpose of the church is to make things better. From our reading, our 21st century U.U. author prophesied, we are in church to learn how to love better. Our purpose is to make this better, to learn how to love better within and ripple and beyond. And across divides of country and language and time, this enduring purpose has been claimed for religious community, for living a life of values, of purpose, of accountability, to make things better. In our living tradition of Unitarian Universalism, we draw heavily from the Hebrew prophets, especially Isaiah 58, who admonished us to stop oppressing those who work for us. Stop oppressing those who work for us. This vision of equity from 6 centuries before the Common Era speaks to a piercing challenge that is fresh before us now. Stop oppressing those who work for us. From the book of Isaiah, it continues, our instruction is to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. We are to share our bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into our homes. We are here to cover the naked. At roughly the same time, around the world from where the author known as Third Isaiah was offering his prophetic vision of economic justice, over in China, the voice of Lao Tzu was emerging through what became the holy books of Taoism, and a fragment of his work is in our hymnal. It's reading number 602. I wonder if you know it. I'll buzz through it, but it's 602. I commend it to you for study and for practice. It is not a reading to think about. It is an invitation into a practice. If we want peace in the world, we must build peace in the nations, he says. And peace in the nations is built with peace in the cities. City peace stands on neighborhood peace, and peace between neighbors rests on peace in the home and is cradled in peace in the heart, which is the foundational generative for peace in the nations. The wisdom of Lao Tzu. When we first read it, as it's in the book, 602, when we first read it, it looks like a linear structure. It looks like a straight line with a beginning and an end. Peace in the heart, peace in the home, neighbors, cities, nations, boom, brings us to the final pinnacle, the goal of peace in the world. But that would be the wrong way to live fully into the wisdom of Lao Tzu. It's not a list of sequential steps. This is not a checklist. This is not a shopping list of things to acquire. This teaching is about motion. It's about the journey, and it's about change. The wisdom of Lao Tzu is a reminder for us to stay in motion. We are never finished. In this teaching, there is no one beginning, no specific ending, no finish line where the motion stops. No fixed sequence. This journey can be enjoined at any point. It is a particular challenge to me that we can't buy the goals of peace at any level. It is a challenge that we can only engage in risk and journey. There's no metric measures for peace in the heart or the home or the nations. And it all seems so very old-fashioned, so frustrating and humbling. By my own culture, I am tasked to succeed. My elders journeyed. We did that already. My task is to succeed. Measurable, tangible, material, visible, accumulative success. And I often wonder as I read Isaiah 58 if some of the appeal for me, the sound of that, the admonitions of the Hebrew prophet, because it lies in the assumption that I have control, that I have authority, and that I have wealth. The charge to stop oppressing the people that work for you. It assumes there are people who work for you. To release the oppressed assumes authority, and to do so that it rests with me, and to feed the hungry assumes wealth, or at the very least agency, which is a form of educational privilege. And I like doing this kind of to-do list social justice because it's coherent with my family, culture, and my charge to accumulate and to succeed. The later Jewish prophet, chronicled in the book of Luke, pushes us more deeply. Luke 3:10. And the crowds asked him, "What then shall we do?" And in reply, Jesus said to him, whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none. Whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none. Whoever has food must do likewise. The instruction from Jesus of Nazareth is more precise than the text that remains from Isaiah. If you have 2 coats, give one away. It's more exacting than simply saying, clothe the naked. It's a more precise challenge. And it can generate that particular kind of discomfort we might feel. And I don't know what your practices are here, but bear with me. There's a kind of discomfort that can happen in religious community when the annual pledge drive folks study the very latest in practices and wisdom from professional fundraisers, and then ask us, based on the surveys and the demographics, to pledge a specific amount to the church. Whoa, rule breaking, right? Pledge a specific amount to the church, not just as Isaiah might say, please give generously, but that particular, in-your-face, scrappy challenge of the prophecies from Jesus. If you have 2 coats, give one away. Whew. A. Powell Davies, minister, Unitarian Church, Washington, D.C., mid-20th century, offered this. Let me tell you why I come to church. I come to church, and I would whether I was a preacher or not, because I fall below my standards and need to be constantly brought back to them. I must have my conscience sharpened until it goads me to the most thorough and responsible thinking of which I am capable. And he says, I must feel again the love that I owe to others. I must not only hear about it, but I must feel it. In church, he says, I do. I feel it. I am brought toward my best. In every way, brought toward my best. Every day, in lives of goodwill and struggle and celebration, we are faced with decisions. For most of us, the question is, which coat do I give away? Do I work for peace in the nations, or do I wrestle with the angels of wisdom seeking peace in my own heart? And I believe the answer is yes. Do we focus too much here? This question that comes from my heart, from our struggles in Ann Arbor. Do we focus too much here on just doing social justice work? Or maybe those preachers preach way too much about spiritual practice and spiritual discipline and working on inner growth. And I expect that those answers, too, are yes. That's the teaching of Lao Tzu. There's no beginning for the journey of social justice, and there's no end for the quest for inner peace. And we never can do one at the expense of the other. Each activity all along this looping continuum, each activity builds and informs the rest. And then we age along the way, and honey, all the questions change. And we have to stay in motion. It's an illusion to imagine that we're only doing the tasks of social justice at any given moment. And it is illusion if we see the inner work, the spiritual work, as happening in isolation from feeding the hungry or freeing the oppressed. When we feel the focus is too much on one or the other, it's a time to assess, and there are so many questions we can ask ourselves. Am I staying in motion? Am I moving forward, even if it's a spiral? Am I moving forward? Am I growing in my own engagement with the world? Am I building my skills, owning my place in my community, in my kinship circle? Do I have 2 coats? Am I giving one away? Have I stopped oppressing the people who work for me? Am I a tourist here? A consumer of church? Or am I owning this? My religious community disappointments at all? Am I digging deep and wrestling from this community every blessing for me and those around me and who will come after me? To engage this journey of living with success requires an outer focus of social action. It demands an inner focus of spiritual practice. Which of these is best? The answer is yes. The question of either or, that polarity of which to embrace, is an illusion of choice and excuse for standing still or disengaging. In an interview, famed New Yorker magazine writer E.B. White explained that what bothers him about the world is its seductiveness and its challenge. If the world were merely seductive, he wrote, that would be easy. And if it were merely challenging, that'd be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world, and that makes it hard to plan the day. For people seeking balance in living, for people aspiring to lead lives of authenticity, purpose, the guidance is yes. For people seeking to learn to love better, people yearning to ease the suffering of others, the guidance is yes. Shall we save the world? Yes. Shall we savor the world? Yes. Shall we save the world or savor the world? Yes. Again and again and again. Yes. And may it be so each time we gather. Thank you. Amen.